Right, welcome back to the front line. Jack Carter here. By the way, if you heard the fireworks last night, you didn't dream it. Tehran lit up like New Year's, and not because the regime got to celebrate. Cars honking, people in the streets shouting "Death to the dictator." Real chants, real joy. Tonight, we're asking the blunt question: are we watching the birth of a free Iran or the first steps into a new kind of chaos? On February 28, 2026, the US and Israel launched massive coordinated strikes. They hit nuclear sites in Natanz, Fordow and Isfahan, IRGC bases around the country, and in a surgical strike that changed everything, the Supreme Leader's compound was hit. Khamenei and several top aides were killed. President Trump, yes, Trump, went on TV and said, "All I want is freedom for the people," and urged Iranians, "Take back your country." Tonight, I have Dr. Laleh Mernadi with me. Laleh, you fled Tehran once. How does this feel from where you stand?
Jack, it feels surreal. I mean, I woke up to videos from friends still in Tehran. They were dancing on highways, fireworks, women cutting their hair in public again, which is huge. For decades, Iranians have learned to hide joy for fear of a knock on the door. So you cut off the head of the system and people pour into the streets. You can't pretend that's a foreign attack in the way Western activists are saying. This feels, to many, like the first real chance to breathe.
Exactly. And we need to be frank about what happened. This wasn't a reckless bombing run. It was coordinated, targeted, repeated strikes. Natanz and Fordow were hit to setback enrichment. IRGC bases and missile sites were degraded. And the strike on Khamenei, that was precise at an inner circle meeting. Washington's message is clear: dismantle the regime's ability to wage nuclear blackmail and proxy war, but do it in a way that gives Iranians the opening to finish the job themselves. Lael, can Iranians finish it?
They might. Look, the protests that began in late 2025 were the biggest sustained uprising since 2009. We're talking about crowds openly chanting against Khamenei, live fire from security forces, thousands killed, tens of thousands arrested. People have been risking everything. When the symbol of tyranny falls, that changes calculations, at least for parts of the security apparatus. There are commanders who saw the regime enrich itself while people starved. Some of them may switch sides, but, and this is critical, it won't be automatic. The IRGC is embedded in every part of the state and economy.
Right. Embedded, but not invincible. By the way, people forget how much the IRG built up resentment through corruption and predatory economics. This isn't just abstract patriotism. This is folks who had family members executed for protesting, who watched the daughters harassed by morality police. Laleh, tell Jack's listeners, why are so many ordinary Iranians celebrating US and Israeli strikes rather than blaming foreign boots on the ground?
Because for them, the strikes are a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. After decades of theocratic tyranny, forced hijab, mass executions, tortured dissidents, an economy gutted by corruption, many Iranians see the regime as the primary cause of their misery. When the head of the system is removed, it looks like an unprecedented opening. And don't underestimate the diaspora. In LA, London, Paris, the same scenes of jubilation. People are exhausted. This is a collective exhale after years of fear.
Exactly. Now, and here's where I get angry. We already have sizable protests across American and Western left groups. Answer: Code Pink, DSA. They're in the streets in DC, New York, LA. They call this an illegal war, regime change fantasy and all that. Lael, you and I both watched these groups during the Massa Amini movement. Where was their outrage then?
Where was it? I ask myself that the whole time. Many of those groups marched with slogans about imperialism, which is fine as critique. But when Iranian women took to the streets, when state forces killed thousands, many of those same activists were largely silent or reduced it to a Western plot. Now they fling themselves into outrage over Western strikes, pointing to civilian casualties, which is heartbreaking when civilians suffer. But they ignore the far greater, decade-long violence of the regime against its own people. It's a moral inconsistency.
Moral inconsistency is putting it mildly. They have a reflex. If America does it, it's imperialism. If an Islamist state kills its citizens, it's a complex internal issue. Meanwhile, Islamist groups in Britain, elements tied to the Muslim Brotherhood, are already framing Khamenei as an anti-imperialist martyr. Lali, run us through what's happening in London.
In the UK, we've seen Brotherhood-aligned networks, certain associations, mosque leaders, student unions issue statements denouncing the strikes as neo-colonial aggression. They call for mass protests and draw parallels to Iraq and Afghanistan. Some fringe voices even glorify the idea of resistance against the West. The troubling pattern is that these groups have long been reluctant to criticize Islamist repression. Their outrage now focuses on the anti-Western angle rather than the welfare of Iranian women and activists who actually suffered under Khamenei. Moral inconsistency is putting it mildly. They have a reflex. If America does it, it's imperialism. If an Islamist state kills its citizens, it's a complex internal issue. Meanwhile, Islamist groups in Britain, elements tied to the Muslim Brotherhood, are already framing Khamenei as an anti-imperialist martyr. Layla, run us through what's happening in London.
So, domestically, in Britain, we could have big clashes between pro-regime demonstrators and jubilant Iranian exiles. Meanwhile, in Israel, strategic win? Explain the immediate fallout there for listeners.
For Israel, short-term, it's a strategic blow to their biggest regional adversary. The leadership of Iran was decapitated, nuclear infrastructure badly damaged. But Iran still manages missiles and proxies, and we've already seen retaliatory launches against airports and civilian areas. Netanyahu has vowed continued action until the threat is neutralized. So Israel wins some breathing room, but is paying the price in rocket and drone strikes and security escalations.
And the Gulf states, Saudi, UAE, Bahrain, they breathe easier, at least privately. A nuclear-armed Iran was their nightmare. Publicly, they're cautious, quietly relieved. But let's not sugarcoat. We're seeing attacks on US bases, threats to shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, and oil market spikes. This could affect global markets, refineries, supply chains. Layla, how much do we risk a regional war versus internal collapse in Iran?
Both are real possibilities. Inside Iran, with Khamenei gone, there's a vacuum. An interim council might claim power, hardliners could attempt brutal counteroffensives, or security forces could fragment. Externally, Iran's proxies, Hezbollah, militias in Iraq, Houthis, may intensify attacks on allied targets. The world faces three core scenarios: rapid collapse, a harsh counter-repression, or a prolonged chaotic stalemate. Any of them could spill over regionally.
Let's unpack those three scenarios. Scenario 1, rapid collapse. Lale.
In the best case, security units defect or stand down, key cities fall to opposition coalitions, and a civilian transitional authority forms fast, maybe with technocrats, secular activists, women's movement leaders, and trusted military figures. International recognition and targeted humanitarian aid would help stabilize, but the transition would be fragile and must avoid the trap of foreign occupation or puppet governments.
Scenario 2, the nightmare. Brutal crackdown.
Surviving hardliners consolidate power, impose martial law, roll out mass arrests and executions, and attempt to quash dissent through terror and propaganda. They scapegoat foreign enemies, use fear to reassert control, and the death toll spikes. That outcome would be catastrophic for civilians and could invite more outside intervention or proxy escalations.
And the third?
Prolonged instability, a fractured Iran where multiple factions fight for control, protests ebb and flow, and proxy conflicts escalate regionally. That produces refugee flows, oil market instability, cyber attacks on Western infrastructure, and a long, grinding crisis that might last years.
So there's definitely risk. But let me be blunt. The moral case for standing with Iranian people is strong. This is a chance to back women, secularists, minority groups, to back freedom over clerical tyranny. But the Western left and Islamist groups are choosing otherwise. That's a historical stain. Lale, what should Western governments do now?
Support Iranians, not the IRGC. That means practical measures, open channels to opposition civil groups, target sanctions at regime elites and military commanders while easing humanitarian aid, prepare asylum pathways for refugees, and coordinate clear messaging that we want an Iranian-led transition. Importantly, don't occupy. Iranians reject foreign occupation. It would delegitimize any new order.
And keep military pressure calibrated, enough to prevent the regime from reconstituting nuclear capability or using proxies to drown the region in war, but not so much that we become occupiers. There will be critics who say, you can't trust America, it'll just exploit Iran. My answer, if you stand on the side of people screaming for freedom while the regime kills the children, what choice is there, Lale?
People will always doubt motives. History makes them cynical. But Iranians have agency. Any Western policy that amplifies that agency, protects civilians, and denies the IRGC resources to terrorize will be judged kindly. The folly would be to let anti-imperialist dogma paralyze action while theocracy reasserts itself.
Final quick hits before we wrap. 1. The Western left's rhetorical posture is a political and moral blind spot. 2. Islamist networks in the UK and elsewhere are revealing their priorities. Anti-Western solidarity often trumps solidarity with actual victims. 3. For hawks like me, this validates that credible force combined with diplomacy can reshape the balance. But the danger of escalation is real and must be managed. Leila, any closing message for listeners who want to support Iranians?
Listen to Iranians on the ground and in exile. Donate to verified human rights groups and humanitarian organizations working with Iranian activists. Pressure your representatives to open safe asylum channels for activists and journalists. And crucially, stop romanticizing regimes just because they posture as anti-Western. Real solidarity is with the women who cut their hair in the street and with families who bury children for demanding freedom.
Powerful. All right, we started this show with fireworks over Tehran. Tonight, that image will be replayed 1,000 times. Some will call it liberation, others an assault. History will judge who stood with the people and who stood with their jailers. For me, the choice is clear. We back freedom. We back the Iranian people. We hold firm against the IRGC and anyone who would drag the region into endless war. Lale, thank you. Stay safe.
Thank you, Jack. Stay sharp. Iran's future is being written in the streets right now, and every voice that amplifies that counts.